What my son Michael didn't know as he carried my belongings down to the musty basement and explained why his family needed the master bedroom was that in exactly 2 weeks, while he and his wife were sipping cocktails in Cancun, I would close on the sale of my own house for $2.8 million cash, leaving them homeless, penniless, and finally, understanding that treating a 72-year-old real estate broker like a burden comes with consequences they never saw coming. Before we dive into this incredible story of family greed meeting entrepreneurial revenge, make sure to hit that like button, drop a comment telling me about the most disrespectful thing a family member has ever asked you to do in your own home, and subscribe because you're going to want to see how a woman who spent 45 years buying and selling properties turned her ungrateful family's assumptions into the most expensive lesson of their lives. My name is Eleanor Hartwell. I'm 72 years old. And this story begins 14 months ago when my world shifted in ways that even my 5 decades in real estate couldn't have prepared me for. For 53 years, I had been married to Robert Hartwell, a successful civil engineer who spent his career designing bridges and infrastructure projects, while I built one of the most respected residential real estate agencies in Northern Virginia. We lived what most people would consider a charmed life in our beautiful 4,800 square foot colonial home in McLean, Virginia, a property I had personally selected, purchased, and transformed into a showcase that was regularly featured in home and garden magazines throughout the Washington, D.C. area. But let me be absolutely clear about something from the start. I wasn't just Robert's wife or my family's convenient elderly relative. I was a woman with 45 years of real estate experience, a broker's license that had never lapsed, and a track record of closing over $500 million in residential transactions throughout the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. My expertise wasn't theoretical or outdated. I had personally negotiated deals for senators, Supreme Court justices, CEOs, foreign diplomats, and entertainment industry executives who demanded discretion, expertise, and results. I understood property values, market timing, negotiation strategies, and investment opportunities with a level of expertise that had generated substantial wealth over the decades. I wasn't some retired housewife playing at real estate. I was a licensed professional who had built and maintained relationships with every major player in the luxury residential market from Georgetown to Great Falls. I had built Hartwell and Associates, real estate from a one-woman operation working out of our basement in 1978 into a boutique agency with 12 licensed agents specializing in luxury properties throughout McLean, Great Falls, Potomac, and the most exclusive neighborhoods of Washington, D.C. My agency represented properties ranging from historic Georgetown townhouses worth $3 million to sprawling estates in horse country that sold for $15 million or more. Expertise included everything from historic preservation consulting and luxury renovation management to investment property analysis and international buyer representation. I spoke fluent French, Italian, and conversational Mandarin, skills that proved invaluable when representing foreign buyers investing in American real estate. I held certifications in commercial real estate, property management, and luxury market analysis, and had been quietly managing our family's real estate portfolio with a level of strategic thinking that had created generational wealth. During my career, I had developed relationships with the most exclusive contractors, architects, interior designers, mortgage brokers, and real estate attorneys in the region. I understood zoning laws, building codes, historic preservation requirements, and the complex world of high-end residential sales in ways that extended far beyond theoretical knowledge. I had successfully navigated volatile market cycles, economic downturns, interest rate fluctuations, and the competitive luxury real estate environment through 5 different decades of changing markets. I had closed deals during the recession of the early 1980s when interest rates hit 18%. I had navigated the savings and loan crisis of the late 1980s. I had managed client portfolios through the dot-com crash of 2001 and the financial crisis of 2008. I had adapted to changing technology, evolving marketing strategies, and shifting buyer preferences while consistently ranking among the top luxury agents in the entire Washington metropolitan area. These skills and relationships would prove more valuable than anyone in my family could have imagined when they decided to treat me like an incompetent burden, rather than a seasoned professional with 5 decades of expertise in exactly the kinds of transactions they thought I was too old to understand. Our property wasn't just any house. It was a meticulously maintained and expanded 1920s colonial revival that Robert and I had spent 38 years transforming from an elegant but outdated property into a showcase of period authenticity combined with modern luxury. We hadn't just bought a house. We had created an architectural masterpiece that was regularly featured in Washington Magazine, Architectural Digest, and historic preservation publications. The main house sat on 2 perfectly landscaped acres in Langley Oaks, one of McLean's most prestigious neighborhoods, just 12 minutes from downtown Washington, D.C., and walking distance from the CIA headquarters. The location was so exclusive that our neighbors included federal judges, Fortune 500 CEOs, foreign ambassadors, and entertainment industry executives who valued privacy and proximity to the nation's capital. The house itself was a stunning example of colonial revival architecture. 4,800 square feet of original heart pine floors, hand-carved crown molding, and millwork that had been restored by craftsmen who specialized in historic preservation. The formal living room featured a fireplace with an original 1920s marble mantel and built-in bookcases that housed Robert's collection of engineering texts and my library of real estate and architectural books. The dining room could seat 12 people comfortably, and had hosted dinner parties for Supreme Court justices, senators, and foreign dignitaries, who appreciated both the historic elegance and Robert's skills as a wine collector. The updated kitchen was a perfect blend of period charm and modern functionality, original cabinetry restored and fitted with contemporary appliances, marble countertops that complemented the home's historic character, and a breakfast nook that overlooked our formal gardens. The master bedroom suite occupied the entire second-floor east wing and included a sitting room with built-in bookshelves, a walk-in closet that I had designed to accommodate my professional wardrobe, and a bathroom with both a clawfoot tub original to the house and a modern shower that Robert had installed during our major renovation in 1995. Beyond the main house, our property included a detached 3-car garage with a fully finished apartment, above it that we had used as guest quarters and office space. The apartment featured a full kitchen, bedroom, bathroom, and living area that could accommodate visiting clients or family members in complete privacy and comfort. The rental potential alone was worth $3,000 per month, though we had never needed the income and preferred the privacy. Our formal gardens had been designed by Patricia Fleming, a landscape architect who specialized in historic properties, and featured period-appropriate plantings that provided year-round beauty while complementing the home's colonial character. The gardens included a rose garden with over 50 varieties, herb gardens that supplied our kitchen, and a greenhouse where I cultivated orchids and tropical plants during Virginia's winter months. The swimming pool and cabana had been added in 1987 and designed to blend seamlessly with the property's historic character. The pool was surrounded by natural stone that matched the house's foundation, and the cabana included changing rooms, a full bathroom, and a covered entertaining area where we had hosted countless summer parties for clients, colleagues, and friends. Tennis court installed in 1992 was regulation size and professionally maintained. Robert and I had played doubles every Sunday morning for 20 years, and we had hosted an annual tennis tournament that raised money for historic preservation causes throughout Virginia. But here's what made this property truly extraordinary. Every renovation, every improvement, every design decision, and every maintenance choice had been carefully planned and executed by Robert and me over nearly 4 decades of marriage. We had invested not just our money, but our expertise, our aesthetic vision, and our shared commitment to creating something that honored the home's historic character while serving our contemporary lifestyle and professional needs. Robert had designed structural improvements that preserved the home's architectural integrity, while adding modern conveniences like central air conditioning, updated electrical systems, and a security system that met the standards required by our high-profile clients and neighbors. He had personally overseen the installation of a whole-house generator, a sophisticated irrigation system for the gardens, and a wine cellar that maintained perfect temperature and humidity for his collection of over 500 bottles. I had managed every contractor, every permit application, every design consultation, and every regulatory approval while maintaining my full-time real estate career and building relationships with the craftsmen and suppliers who became our preferred partners for client projects. Together, we had created something that architectural preservationists, luxury real estate professionals, and interior designers regularly used as an example of how to honor historic properties while adapting them for modern living. The property had been featured in 3 different Washington Magazine home tours, 2 Architectural Digest articles about historic preservation in Virginia, and a Historic Preservation Society publication about successful colonial revival restorations. We had been invited to speak at conferences about historic property renovation and had advised dozens of clients on similar projects throughout our careers. More importantly, this property was entirely mine. When Robert passed away 15 months ago after a brief but courageous battle with pancreatic cancer, he left everything to me in a will that had been carefully crafted by our attorney, Jonathan Mitchell, who had been our friend and legal counsel for over 20 years. The house, our investment portfolio, my real estate business, our various savings accounts, Robert's wine collection, and his substantial life insurance policies, all of it became mine to manage as I saw fit. This wasn't an accident, oversight, or temporary arrangement. Robert and I had discussed our estate planning thoroughly and updated our wills every 3 years as our assets grew and our understanding of legacy planning evolved. We had consulted with estate planning specialists, tax attorneys, and financial advisors to ensure that our wishes would be honored and our assets protected. Robert insisted that everything go to me because, as he told Jonathan during our final will revision just 6 months before his diagnosis, Eleanor has been the financial strategist and business development expert of this partnership since day one. She understands real estate markets, investment, timing, and wealth preservation better than most financial professionals. She'll know exactly how to protect what we've built while making smart decisions about the future. He was absolutely right. I had been the one managing our real estate investments, coordinating our retirement planning, and developing the long-term vision that allowed us to live comfortably while building substantial wealth and maintaining our professional reputations for the last 30 years of our marriage. While Robert focused on his engineering consulting and our home's structural systems, I had been researching investment opportunities, managing our portfolio of rental properties, analyzing market trends, and developing the strategic thinking that had generated millions in asset appreciation. By the time Robert died, our net worth was approximately $4.2 million. The house was worth $2.8 million according to the most recent appraisal. We had $900,000 in various investment accounts, $300,000 in my real estate business assets including client lists and exclusive listing agreements, and $200,000 in life insurance proceeds. We also owned a renovated beach cottage in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, that was worth $400,000 and generated $30,000 annually in rental income. Additionally, I owned a 25% partnership in a commercial building in downtown McLean that housed upscale offices and retail spaces, generating quarterly distributions that averaged $15,000. I had exclusive listing agreements with 3 luxury developments in Northern Virginia that guaranteed commission income for the next 18 months, and a waiting list of high-net-worth clients who wanted my representation when they were ready to buy or sell. I mention these numbers not to boast, but to establish something crucial. I was not a poor widow dependent on my family's charity, guidance, or financial support. I was a financially secure, property-owning, business-operating woman who had spent decades making smart decisions about money, real estate, and wealth building. I had more liquid assets and investment expertise than most people accumulate in their entire lifetimes. My son Michael was our only child, born when I was 29 and Robert was 32. We had tried for several years to have children, experiencing one miscarriage and the heartbreak of fertility treatments before Michael finally arrived healthy and perfect. When he did, we devoted ourselves to raising him with an appreciation for education, hard work, historic preservation, and the value of building something meaningful with your life. Perhaps we devoted too much without requiring enough personal responsibility in return. In retrospect, I can see that we may have provided Michael with too many advantages, too much financial security, and too many safety nets without insisting that he develop his own work ethic and financial independence. But at the time, we were simply parents who wanted to give our only child every opportunity to develop his talents and find his own path to success and fulfillment. Michael was undeniably intelligent and academically gifted. He excelled in school through high school, received a full academic scholarship to the University of Virginia, where he studied business administration and finance, graduating summa cum laude with a 3.9 GPA. During college, he interned with prestigious financial services firms in Richmond and Washington, D.C., and seemed genuinely interested in following a path that would combine business acumen with meaningful work. But somewhere during his post-college years, particularly after he moved to Richmond and started working in corporate finance, Michael developed an attitude toward money, success, and family relationships that troubled both Robert and me deeply. He began to view our comfortable lifestyle as evidence that we had made it, rather than as the result of decades of careful planning, consistent work, and strategic decision-making. "Mom, you and Dad have built something amazing here," he would say during visits home, "but you're not thinking strategically about maximizing your assets. This house could be generating serious rental income if you developed the garage apartment properly and maybe added another unit. Michael, we're not interested in becoming landlords or destroying the property's historic character. We're interested in preserving what we've built and enjoying our home." But that's so financially short-sighted. You could be generating $5,000 a month in rental income from that space alone. You're sitting on hundreds of thousands of dollars in unrealized value that could be funding your retirement. "Michael, we don't need rental income to fund our retirement. We've planned quite well for our financial security." But why leave money on the table? You could be building wealth that would benefit the whole family instead of just maintaining a big house that you don't really need. These conversations revealed a fundamental disconnect between Michael's emerging worldview and the values that Robert and I had tried to instill in him throughout his childhood and education. He was beginning to see everything, including our life's work and our family home, primarily through the lens of financial optimization and profit maximization rather than personal fulfillment, historic preservation, or meaningful contribution to our community. After college, Michael moved to Richmond and worked for several financial firms, eventually landing a well-paying position as a senior investment advisor for Commonwealth Financial Services, a company that managed retirement accounts and investment portfolios for Virginia state government employees. He was earning $85,000 annually plus bonuses, living in a nice apartment in the Fan District and dating regularly. From the outside, he appeared to be building a successful independent life. 4 years ago, he married Jennifer Walsh, a 31-year-old marketing coordinator who worked for Riverside Health System, managing marketing campaigns for their network of hospitals and medical facilities throughout Central Virginia. I genuinely wanted to like Jennifer. She was attractive, well-educated, professionally successful, and seemed to make Michael happy during their courtship. Jennifer had grown up in Virginia Beach as the daughter of a Navy officer and a high school teacher. She had earned her marketing degree from James Madison University, worked her way up through several marketing positions, and was apparently quite successful in her field. She seemed intelligent, articulate, and professionally competent. But from the very beginning of their relationship, something about Jennifer's attitude toward our family, our home, and our lifestyle made me deeply uncomfortable. Unlike Michael's previous girlfriends who had shown genuine interest in our home's history, appreciated the architectural details, and seemed to understand the work Robert and I had put into creating something meaningful, Jennifer viewed our property primarily as a real estate asset that represented inherited wealth rather than earned achievement. During their first visit to introduce Jennifer to our home and family, she spent most of the weekend taking photographs, with her phone and asking detailed questions about square footage, property taxes, neighborhood comparable sales, maintenance costs, and potential market value. She showed minimal interest in the historic preservation work we had done, the architectural features that made the house special, or the gardens and entertaining spaces that we had created for our personal enjoyment and professional entertaining. But from the very beginning of their relationship, something about Jennifer's attitude toward our family, our home, and our lifestyle made me deeply uncomfortable. Unlike Michael's previous girlfriends who had shown genuine interest in our home's history, appreciated the architectural details, and seemed to understand the work Robert and I had put into creating something meaningful, Jennifer viewed our property primarily as a real estate asset that represented inherited wealth rather than earned achievement. During their first visit to introduce Jennifer to our home and family, she spent most of the weekend taking photographs, with her phone and asking detailed questions about square footage, property taxes, neighborhood comparable sales, maintenance costs, and potential market value. She showed minimal interest in the historic preservation work we had done, the architectural features that made the house special, or the gardens and entertaining spaces that we had created for our personal enjoyment and professional entertaining. "This house is absolutely stunning," she told me as we stood in the renovated kitchen during her first visit. "The location is incredible, the property size is perfect, and the appreciation potential is extraordinary. You could easily get $3 million for this place in today's market, maybe more if you updated a few things. Jennifer, we have no intention of selling the house. We've spent 38 years making it our home and our professional showcase. Of course not now, but you have to think about the future and estate planning. Michael and I could help you. Develop a long-term strategy that would maximize the property's value while ensuring you're taken care of as you age and need more support." The conversation revealed that Jennifer was already thinking about our property as something she and Michael would eventually inherit, manage, and potentially liquidate, rather than as our current home that we intended to preserve and protect for as long as we chose to live there. Jennifer, Robert, and I have excellent estate planning in place, and we're quite capable of managing our own financial future. I'm sure you are. I just think it's smart to get younger family members involved in planning so everyone's on the same page about expectations and responsibilities. But what really troubled me was Jennifer's attitude toward Robert during his final illness. As his pancreatic cancer progressed rapidly and he required increasing medical care and physical support, Jennifer began making pointed comments about the burden of maintaining such a large property and suggesting that we should consider transitioning to a more manageable living situation before Robert's condition worsened further. "Eleanor, I know you love this house," she said during one particularly difficult visit when Robert was undergoing chemotherapy and having trouble with mobility and appetite. "But you have to be realistic about the future. This property requires constant maintenance, coordination, and physical oversight. And as you and Robert deal with his illness, it's going to become impossible to manage everything properly. Jennifer, we have excellent contractors, housekeepers, and groundskeepers who help with all the maintenance, and I'm perfectly capable of managing the property and coordinating care. But what happens when Robert—" She paused with calculated delicacy. "What happens when you're here alone? You can't possibly handle 4,800 square feet and 2 acres by yourself, especially while you're grieving and adjusting to Widowhood. Jennifer was suggesting that I should start planning for widowhood by downsizing my life, liquidating my assets, and moving away from the property that represented my life's work and professional identity. She seemed to view Robert's illness as a convenient opportunity to plant seeds about my future need for their guidance, assistance, and management of my affairs. After Robert died, Jennifer and Michael's visits became more frequent, more intrusive, and more focused on what they called helping me adjust to my new reality and responsibilities. But their version of help involved constant suggestions about how I should simplify my life, reduce my responsibilities, liquidate my assets, and make decisions that would set me up for success and security as I age. The suggestions started small and seemingly reasonable, but gradually became more invasive, presumptuous, and controlling. Michael thought I should hire a full-service property management company to handle all maintenance, repairs, contractor coordination, and grounds keeping. Despite the fact that I had been managing these relationships successfully for decades and preferred working with contractors I knew and trusted. Jennifer suggested I should consider renting out the main house and moving into the garage apartment to generate income and reduce my overwhelming living expenses, despite the fact that my finances were perfectly secure and I had no interest in becoming a landlord or giving up my privacy and comfort. They both expressed constant worry about me living alone in such a large house in such an isolated location, despite the fact that McLean was hardly isolated and I had neighbors, friends, and professional colleagues throughout the area who were available for both social interaction and emergency assistance. "Mom, we just want you to be safe, comfortable, and financially secure," Michael would say when I expressed resistance to their increasingly intrusive suggestions. "This house is beautiful, but it's also a lot of responsibility and expense. Wouldn't it be easier and more practical to find something smaller and more manageable that wouldn't require so much of your time and energy?" "Michael, I'm perfectly comfortable managing this house and perfectly capable of handling the responsibilities. I've been doing it successfully for 38 years. But you've never done it alone. Dad handled all the technical systems, contractor relationships, and heavy maintenance coordination. Are you really prepared to manage the heating and cooling systems, coordinate major repairs, handle property taxes and insurance claims, and deal with all the regulatory requirements and neighborhood association obligations?" Michael was suggesting that I was incapable of managing tasks that I had actually been handling throughout our marriage, while Robert focused on his engineering work and structural projects. He seemed to have conveniently forgotten that I was the one who had managed our business affairs, coordinated contractors for our renovation projects, and handled regulatory compliance and neighborhood relations throughout our marriage. "Michael, I've been coordinating contractors, managing property taxes and insurance, and handling regulatory requirements for my real estate clients for 45 years. I think I can manage my own house." "But this is different. This is your personal residence, not a business transaction. There's more emotional stress involved, and you're dealing with grief and adjustment at the same time." Michael was suggesting that my decades of professional expertise somehow didn't apply to managing my own property because emotional factors would impair my judgment and decision-making capabilities. But the most troubling conversations started, happening around 8 months after Robert's death, when Jennifer began raising the topic of long-term planning and realistic expectations with increasing frequency, urgency, and specificity. "Eleanor, Michael, and I have been thinking seriously about your situation, and we're genuinely concerned about what happens as you get older and need more support," she said during a Sunday dinner that I had prepared for them in my own dining room, using china and crystal that had been wedding gifts 53 years earlier. "What kind of support are you referring to, Jennifer?" "Well, eventually you'll probably need help with daily activities, medical care, social interaction, household management. Right now, you're healthy and independent, but that's going to change significantly over the next few years." Jennifer was suggesting that my future decline and dependence were inevitable and that I should begin planning immediately for incapacity, medical needs, and social isolation rather than continued independence, good health, and active engagement with my community and profession. What I didn't expect during those first few months after Robert's death was how quickly Jennifer and Michael would transition from supportive family members offering occasional suggestions to self-appointed life managers who seemed to believe they had both the authority and the obligation to make fundamental decisions about my future. It started with helpful recommendations about optimizing my lifestyle, but gradually escalated into a systematic campaign designed to convince me that I was incapable of managing my own affairs and desperately needed their intervention. Transformation became glaringly obvious during what should have been a pleasant family weekend in late October, about 10 months after Robert's passing. Jennifer and Michael had driven up from Richmond for what they described as a relaxing fall visit to help with some seasonal property maintenance. What it actually turned out to be was a carefully orchestrated intervention designed to pressure me into accepting their increasingly intrusive vision of my future. They arrived on a Friday evening with enough luggage and supplies for what appeared to be an extended stay, despite having told me they were planning a simple weekend visit to help with winterizing the pool and gardens. I watched from my kitchen window as Michael unloaded multiple boxes of files, a laptop computer, a portable printer, presentation materials, and what looked like real estate market analysis reports from their SUV. "Mom," Michael said as he carried everything into the guest cottage where they always stayed during visits, "Jennifer and I have been doing extensive research on your behalf, and we wanted to spend the weekend going through some practical options and solutions that we think could really improve your quality of life and financial security." "What kind of research and options?" "Living options, financial optimization strategies, property management solutions, estate planning updates, just different approaches that could make your life significantly easier, safer, and more financially efficient." It was a reasonable-sounding explanation, but the sheer volume of preparation they had done suggested this was less a casual family conversation and more a formal business presentation designed to convince me to accept predetermined conclusions about my capabilities and needs. "Michael, I didn't ask you to research living options or financial strategies on my behalf. I'm quite capable of handling my own planning." "I know, Mom, but that's what caring family does. We look out for each other and help each other navigate complex life decisions and transitions. You would have done the same thing for us if we were facing a major life change that required strategic thinking and careful planning." The phrase major life transition revealed how Michael was framing my widowhood, not as a personal loss that I needed time to process and adjust to at my own pace, but as a logistical crisis that required immediate solution through comprehensive family intervention and management. Over the following weekend, Jennifer and Michael revealed the full scope of their research, analysis, and recommendations. They had prepared detailed comparative studies of senior living communities, continuing care facilities, luxury retirement developments, and assisted living options throughout Northern Virginia and the broader Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. They had researched property management companies, estate planning services, financial advisory firms, and elder care specialists who could allegedly help me navigate the complex decisions that elderly property owners face. Most disturbing of all, they had prepared what amounted to a comprehensive strategic plan for completely restructuring my current lifestyle and relocating me to what they described as a more appropriate and sustainable living situation for someone at your stage of life. "Mom, we know this seems overwhelming and probably feels intrusive," Jennifer said as she methodically spread charts, graphs, brochures, and financial projections across my dining room table like a real estate agent presenting a listing portfolio. "But we want you to see all the incredible options that exist for people in your specific situation and demographic." What exactly is my specific situation and demographic? Well, you're a 72-year-old widow living alone on a large, expensive property that requires constant maintenance, coordination, and oversight. You're dealing with grief, significant financial assets that need professional management, and the responsibility of maintaining a complex property without the partner who helped you handle the technical and physical aspects for over 30 years. Jennifer was describing my life as a series of overwhelming problems and burdens, rather than as an experience that included both manageable challenges and tremendous satisfaction. She had reduced my relationship with Robert to a business partnership focused on property maintenance, rather than a marriage that involved emotional, intellectual, creative, and professional collaboration across multiple decades. Jennifer, I'm managing the property perfectly well. I've been actively involved in every aspect of its development, maintenance, and improvement throughout our entire marriage. Of course you have been involved, but Eleanor, there's a significant difference between being involved as part of a team and being the sole decision-maker responsible for everything. You're transitioning from a shared responsibility model to having to handle absolutely everything independently, and that's a massive change that would challenge anyone, regardless of age or competence. I prefer handling things independently, to having other people make decisions about my life, my property, and my future. But that's exactly our point, David interjected with what sounded like a rehearsed talking point. You shouldn't have to handle everything independently when there are professional services, community resources, and living arrangements specifically designed to provide support while preserving your independence and autonomy. Michael was presenting their intervention as a way to preserve my independence, while actually arguing that I should give up the genuine independence I currently enjoyed in favor of supported independence that would involve professional management of my daily life by people I hadn't chosen and didn't need. The weekend continued with increasingly detailed presentations about why my current lifestyle was financially inefficient, physically demanding, and socially isolating, and why their recommended alternatives would be better for everyone involved, including you. Jennifer had prepared an elaborate financial analysis, comparing the costs of maintaining my current property with the costs of various senior living options throughout the region. According to her calculations, I was spending approximately $65,000 per year on property taxes, insurance, utilities, maintenance, landscaping, housekeeping, and home improvements, while comparable luxury senior communities would cost between $75,000 and $150,000 per year, but would include meals, housekeeping, social activities, transportation services, and on-site medical support. Eleanor, when you factor in the value of all the services provided, plus the social benefits, security features, and peace of mind that comes with community living, the senior living options actually offer significantly better value than maintaining this property independently, especially when you consider the risks and uncertainties of aging in place. Jennifer's analysis conveniently ignored several crucial factors that made her calculations meaningless. I genuinely enjoyed maintaining my property and had no interest in institutional meals or organized social activities. I valued privacy, autonomy, and the ability to make my own daily decisions over security and managed services. Most importantly, my property was an appreciating asset that had increased in value by over $800,000 since we purchased it, rather than a pure expense that generated no return on investment. Jennifer, this property has appreciated significantly in value and continues to appreciate at above-market rates because of its location, condition, and historic character. It's not just an expense, it's one of my most valuable investments. But Eleanor, real estate appreciation is unpredictable and requires active management to maintain value. Are you really prepared to handle major renovations, market fluctuations, maintenance emergencies, and all the other challenges that come with property ownership at your age? I've been handling real estate market fluctuations, renovation projects, and maintenance challenges for 45 years professionally. Why would I suddenly be incapable of managing my own property? Because managing your own residence is completely different from managing client properties. There's emotional attachment, personal stress, and the physical demands of living in a space while maintaining it. Plus, as you age, Your energy levels and problem-solving abilities will naturally decline. Jennifer was suggesting that my age automatically made me unsuitable for property management, despite my decades of successful experience in exactly those challenges, and that emotional attachment to my home would somehow impair, rather than motivate, my decision-making abilities. Michael reinforced Jennifer's financial analysis with his own research about the documented challenges that elderly people face when they attempt to maintain independent lifestyles in large properties in suburban locations. Mom, I've been reading extensively about the issues that people over 70 face when they try to age in place in properties like this. Things like social isolation, limited access to emergency medical care, difficulty with routine maintenance, tasks, and the physical and cognitive demands of managing complex households. Michael, I'm hardly socially isolated. I have friends, neighbors, colleagues, and clients throughout this area. I'm 20 minutes from some of the best medical facilities in the country. And I've been managing complex households and properties for decades without any difficulty. But Mom, what happens when those things change? What happens when your friends move away or develop their own health problems? What happens when you can't drive safely anymore? Or when you have a medical emergency and there's no one immediately available to help? What happens when routine maintenance becomes physically impossible or when you forget important tasks because of normal age-related cognitive changes? Michael was asking me to plan my current life around hypothetical future limitations rather than my actual present capabilities, energy levels, and preferences. He was also suggesting that normal age-related cognitive changes were inevitable and would necessarily impair my ability to manage my own affairs. Michael, I'll address those issues if and when they actually arise. Right now, I'm perfectly capable of living independently, managing my property, and making my own decisions about my lifestyle and my future. But wouldn't it be much smarter and less stressful to plan ahead and make changes while you're still healthy and can choose the best available options, rather than waiting until there's a medical crisis or emergency that forces you to make hasty decisions under pressure? The logic seemed superficially reasonable, but it required me to give up my current lifestyle, which I loved and found fulfilling, based on the assumption that decline and dependence were inevitable, rather than possibilities that might or might not occur, and that I could address if and when they became actual rather than theoretical problems. The most revealing part of their weekend presentation came when they started discussing in detail what would happen to my property if I decided to follow their recommendations and move to a senior living community. Obviously, you'd want to sell the property to fund your new living arrangement and ensure long-term financial security, Jennifer said, as if this were an obvious and inevitable conclusion rather than a major decision that I would need to consider, carefully based on my own financial needs and personal preferences. Would I necessarily want to sell? Well, maintaining an empty property would be extremely expensive and logistically complicated, especially if you're living an hour away, and the sale proceeds would provide substantial financial security for whatever care you might need in the future, plus funding for travel, hobbies, and other retirement activities. What would happen to the historic preservation work Robert and I spent 38 years developing and the architectural integrity that makes this property special? The new owners would make their own decisions about how to use and modify the property. Maybe they'd continue some of the preservation work, or maybe they'd renovate it in a different style that better suits their preferences and lifestyle needs. Jennifer was suggesting that the historic preservation legacy that represented Robert's and my life's work, professional reputation, and contribution to our community was less important than my financial security and convenience. She was treating decades of careful restoration and architectural preservation as optional features that future owners could discard if they interfered with their plans. Jennifer, this property represents decades of historic preservation, architectural restoration, and community contribution. It's not just a real estate asset. It's a preserved example of 1920s colonial revival architecture and a demonstration of responsible restoration practices. Eleanor, I understand that this place has enormous sentimental value and historical significance, but you have to be realistic about your priorities as you age. Your long-term financial security, healthcare access, and social support are more important than preserving a property that you won't be able to enjoy, maintain, or share with family. Who says I won't be able to enjoy, maintain, or share it? Well, eventually, everyone reaches a point where they can't manage complex properties independently. It's much better to plan for that transition while you still have choices and can make decisions calmly, rather than waiting until you're forced to make changes during a health crisis or family emergency. This conversation revealed that Jennifer viewed my attachment to our property as sentimental rather than practical, professional, and financially sound, and that she considered my future decline to be absolutely certain rather than one possible scenario among several. But what came next showed the true scope of their plans for my property and their intended role in its acquisition and development. Actually, Michael said with what seemed like carefully planned timing, Jennifer and I have been talking seriously about the possibility of purchasing the property ourselves, if you do decide that selling makes the most sense for your situation. You want to buy my property? We want to keep it in the family and honor what you and Dad built here, while also helping you achieve your financial and lifestyle goals. If you moved to a senior living community that better meets your current needs, we could purchase the property, preserve its historic character, and continue the preservation work while also developing some of its income-generating potential. What kind of income-generating potential are you referring to? Well, this property would be absolutely perfect for luxury vacation rentals, boutique bed and breakfast operations, small event hosting, or even corporate retreat facilities. We could generate substantial income while preserving all the historic and architectural features that are important to you and honoring Dad's memory. Michael was proposing to purchase my property and convert it into exactly the kind of commercial hospitality operation that he had been arguing I was too old, too inexperienced, and too overwhelmed to manage myself. Michael, if this property has potential for vacation rentals and boutique hospitality, why couldn't I develop those opportunities myself? Because, Mom, that kind of business development requires significant capital investment, hospitality industry expertise, marketing and reservation management, licensing and regulatory compliance, and the energy and stamina to handle a demanding startup operation. Even if you have the financial resources, do you really want to take on that kind of complex, stressful project at your age? Michael was acknowledging that my property had excellent potential for exactly the kind of hospitality and event business I had experience with through my real estate career, while simultaneously arguing that I was too old, inexperienced, and fragile to pursue that potential myself. Michael, I've been working with hospitality businesses, event planners, and vacation rental owners throughout my real estate career. I've helped clients purchase, renovate, and launch exactly the kind of businesses you're describing. But that was as their agent, not as the business owner. This would be a massive personal undertaking that would require years of intensive planning, construction management, staff hiring and training, and daily operational oversight. What makes you think I'm not interested in intensive projects that would use my professional expertise and provide new challenges? Mom, you're 72 years old. Shouldn't you be thinking about reducing stress and enjoying a more relaxed retirement lifestyle rather than starting a demanding new business venture that could consume all your time and energy? Michael was suggesting that my age automatically made me unsuitable for entrepreneurial ventures, despite my demonstrated business expertise, financial resources, and proven track record of managing complex projects successfully. Jennifer reinforced Michael's perspective with her own analysis of the practical challenges involved in developing the property for commercial use. Eleanor, hospitality business development involves dealing with county planning departments, state licensing agencies, environmental regulations, construction management, staff hiring and training, marketing and reservation systems, food service, operations if you include catering, It's incredibly complex, time-consuming, and stressful, even for experienced business operators. Jennifer, I've been working with county planning departments, licensing agencies, and construction management throughout my real estate career. Why would I suddenly be incapable of handling those processes for my own project? It's not that you're incapable. It's that this kind of project requires years of sustained effort, attention to detail, problem-solving under pressure, and the physical and emotional stamina to handle multiple crises simultaneously. Even highly capable people find hospitality businesses overwhelming and exhausting. Jennifer was suggesting that I should avoid challenging and potentially rewarding work because it might be overwhelming, rather than recognizing that I might find such work energizing, fulfilling, and an excellent use of my accumulated expertise and resources. But the most disturbing aspect of their weekend intervention was how they had begun to position themselves as the responsible, caring family members who were looking out for my best interests, while implying that my resistance to their suggestions was evidence of poor judgment, emotional instability, or age-related cognitive decline. Mom, we know this is incredibly hard to think about, Michael said during one particularly condescending conversation over Sunday breakfast that I had prepared in my own kitchen. Losing Dad was traumatic and life-changing, and making major decisions while you're still grieving and adjusting is really difficult and emotionally overwhelming. We just want to help you avoid making choices based on grief or stubbornness that you might seriously regret later. Michael was suggesting that my grief was impairing my judgment and that my preferences about my own life were potentially mistaken rather than valid expressions of my values, priorities, and vision for my future. Michael, I'm not making decisions based on grief or stubbornness. I'm making decisions based on careful consideration of what I want my life to look like going forward, combined with realistic assessment of my capabilities, resources, and interests. But Mom, are you sure you're thinking clearly and objectively about what's realistic and sustainable? Sometimes when people are dealing with major loss, they hold on to things that represent their past rather than planning realistically for their future needs and limitations. My property doesn't just represent my past, it represents my ongoing work, my professional identity, and my future possibilities for continued growth and contribution. But what if those possibilities aren't actually realistic anymore? What if you're holding on to a lifestyle that made sense when Dad was alive, but doesn't make sense for your current situation, capabilities, and needs? Michael was suggesting that my lifestyle had been entirely dependent on Robert in ways that made it impossible to continue, rather than recognizing that I had been an equal partner in creating and maintaining our way of life and was perfectly capable of continuing independently. Jennifer reinforced Michael's psychological analysis with her own observations about my adjustment process and grief-related decision-making patterns. Eleanor, it's completely normal and understandable to want to maintain everything exactly as it was when Robert was alive. That's a natural part of grieving and shows how much you loved him and valued your life together. But eventually, healthy adjustment and moving forward means accepting that some things need to change to accommodate your new reality. What specifically needs to change, according to your analysis? Well, your living situation, your daily responsibilities, your social routines, your financial management, all of those were built around being part of a married couple and sharing responsibilities with a partner. Now that you're on your own, it makes sense to create a lifestyle that's specifically designed for independent single living, rather than trying to maintain a couples-oriented setup. Jennifer was suggesting that my current lifestyle was inherently unhealthy because it had been designed for couple living, rather than recognizing that I was perfectly capable of independent living in the environment I had helped create and knew how to maintain. Jennifer, I am living independently. I'm successfully managing my property, my finances, my social relationships, and my daily activities without assistance from anyone. But for how much longer realistically, and at what cost to your energy, your health, your peace of mind. You're spending enormous amounts of time and mental energy maintaining a lifestyle that's becoming increasingly difficult to sustain, and that doesn't really fit your current life stage and priorities. I'm spending time and energy on work and activities that I find meaningful, fulfilling, and enjoyable. But Eleanor, there are so many other meaningful and fulfilling activities that you could pursue if you weren't tied down by property management responsibilities and household maintenance. You could travel extensively, take classes and workshops, volunteer for causes you care about, develop new friendships and hobbies, maybe even write a book about your real estate career. Jennifer was painting a picture of generic senior activities. That might appeal to some people but had no connection to my actual interests, values, or vision for how I wanted to spend my remaining years. She was suggesting that I should give up work I found rewarding in favor of leisure activities that she assumed would be more age-appropriate. The weekend concluded with Jennifer and Michael presenting what they called their comprehensive recommendation for my serious consideration and hopefully prompt implementation. Mom, after analyzing all the available options and carefully considering your specific situation, needs, and preferences, we think the best choice would be Potomac Senior Living in Bethesda. It's a luxury continuing care community that offers independent living apartments for healthy, active seniors, plus assisted living services if you need more support later, and comprehensive memory care facilities if that ever becomes necessary. You want me to move to a continuing care facility that includes memory care and assisted living? We want you to choose a place that can accommodate whatever changes might occur in your health, mobility, or cognitive function over time. Potomac Senior Living would allow you to stay in one community and maintain friendships and routines, even if your needs change significantly. Jennifer and Michael were recommending that I plan my living situation around the assumption that I would eventually need memory care, assisted living, and comprehensive medical supervision, rather than around my current excellent health and continued independence. Michael, I have no symptoms of cognitive decline, no significant health problems, and no reason to believe I'll need memory care or assisted living services. But Mom, none of us knows what the future holds or what challenges we might face as we age. Wouldn't it be better to be prepared for any possibility rather than assuming everything will stay exactly the same? I'd rather plan for continued health, independence, and active engagement rather than inevitable decline and dependence. But what if that's not realistic? What if you're being overly optimistic about aging and not adequately preparing for the challenges that most people face? Michael was suggesting that planning for continued competence and independence was overly optimistic, rather than a reasonable and healthy approach to life planning that would motivate me to maintain my health and capabilities. Jennifer concluded their presentation with what she clearly considered a generous and helpful offer. Eleanor, if you decide that Potomac Senior Living is the right choice for you, Michael and I would be happy to handle absolutely all the details of selling this property and coordinating your relocation. We could take care of the real estate, transaction, the moving logistics, estate sale coordination, and help you choose which belongings to keep and which to donate or sell. You want to handle selling my property? We want to make the transition as easy and stress-free as possible. For you, real estate transactions involving high-value properties can be incredibly complicated and emotionally stressful, especially when they involve properties like this that have unique historic features and regulatory considerations. Jennifer was offering to manage the sale of my property as if this were a favor she was doing for me, rather than an opportunity for her to potentially earn a substantial commission while controlling every aspect of the transaction terms, timing, and buyer selection. Jennifer, I'm a licensed real estate broker with 45 years of experience. I'm perfectly capable of managing real estate transactions, especially involving my own property. Of course you are technically capable, but this would be an emotional sale, not just a business transaction. Having family members handle all the stressful details might be much easier than dealing with all the paperwork, negotiations, and logistical coordination yourself while you're also adjusting to a major Life change. Jennifer was suggesting that I would be too emotionally compromised to handle the business aspects of selling my own property, despite my decades of professional experience managing emotionally charged real estate transactions for clients who were dealing with divorce, death, financial crisis, and family conflicts. But what revealed the ultimate scope of their intentions was Michael's seemingly casual comment about their own housing and career plans. Actually, Mom, if you do decide that selling makes sense for you, Jennifer and I have been thinking about making some major changes in our own living situation and career paths. We've been renting in Richmond and thinking about buying something with more space, privacy, and investment potential. What does that have to do with my property and my decisions? Well, if you sell this place, and if the buyer would be interested in a property management or caretaking arrangement, we might consider relocating to this area and managing the property for the new owners. Jennifer's marketing work is mostly digital now, so she could work remotely from anywhere, and I could probably negotiate a remote work arrangement or find a position with a financial firm in the DC area. Michael was suggesting that they could purchase my property, move into it themselves, and operate whatever business they developed from it while I lived in a senior care facility an hour away, visiting occasionally as a guest in my former home. Michael, are you asking me to sell you my property so you can live in it while I move to assisted living? We're asking you to consider comprehensive solutions that would work well for everyone involved. If we bought the property from you, you'd have guaranteed financial security for whatever care you might need. We'd be able to preserve and continue what you and Dad built here, and everyone would benefit from an arrangement that keeps the property in the family. How would I benefit from losing my home and my life's work so you can live here instead of me? You'd benefit by having guaranteed long-term financial security, access to professional medical care and social services, and the peace of mind that comes from knowing your property is being maintained and preserved by family members who understand its history and significance. Michael was framing my displacement from my own property as a benefit I would receive, rather than a sacrifice I would make for their convenience, financial advantage, and lifestyle preferences. But what I found most disturbing about this entire weekend intervention was how Jennifer and Michael had developed elaborate plans for my future, without ever genuinely asking what I wanted, what would make me happy, or what my own goals and vision for my remaining years might be. They had researched senior living facilities, analyzed my finances, and calculated property values, but they had never actually inquired about my own interests, priorities, or dreams for how I wanted to live my life going forward. They had assumed that being widowed at 72 automatically made me a candidate for managed care and property liquidation, regardless of my health, competence, professional expertise, or personal preferences. They had decided that their vision of appropriate aging should override my own choices about how to live my life and use my accumulated resources and expertise. Most importantly, they had revealed that their concern for my welfare was completely inseparable from their interest in inheriting and controlling my property for their own financial benefit and lifestyle enhancement. But what Jennifer and Michael didn't know was that while they were spending their weekend trying to convince me to give up my independence and relocate to institutional care, I had been spending my months since Robert's death developing a very different and much more strategic vision for my property and my future, a vision that would honor Robert's memory and our shared work while creating exactly the kind of business opportunity that Michael had acknowledged was perfect for our location and property. But with me as the owner, operator, and primary beneficiary rather than them. While they were researching senior living facilities and calculating the costs of assisted living, I had been quietly consulting with commercial real estate specialists, hospitality industry, experts, and business development consultants about the possibilities for transforming our property into a luxury bed and breakfast or boutique event venue. While they were planning my displacement from my property, I had been researching zoning requirements, licensing procedures, and market opportunities for exactly the kind of hospitality business that would use my real estate expertise while generating substantial income and providing meaningful work. But more importantly, While they were assuming that I would need their guidance and management, I had been developing a strategy that would demonstrate exactly how wrong they were about my capabilities, while teaching them the most expensive lesson about underestimating elderly women that they would ever receive. However, I wasn't ready to reveal any of these plans yet. I wanted to see exactly how far they would go with their campaign to convince me that I was too old and incapable to manage my own life. I wanted to understand the full scope of what they were planning for my property and my future before I showed them what I was actually capable of achieving. Because while they were researching ways to manage me out of my own life, I was preparing to demonstrate exactly who they had underestimated and what that mistake was going to cost them. Their assumptions about my declining capabilities were about to collide with my next entrepreneurial venture in ways that would make their property acquisition dreams look like children playing with toy houses in a sandbox. But first, they had to complete their campaign to convince me that I needed their management, guidance, and control. That campaign was about to escalate, from subtle pressure to outright manipulation, false expertise, and emotional blackmail that would finally push me to reveal the full scope of my own plans and capabilities. Little did they know that every condescending suggestion they made about my limitations was actually confirming my determination to prove them spectacularly and expensively wrong. The moment that changed everything came on a freezing February morning, during what Jennifer had orchestrated as our final family meeting to resolve your living situation once and for all. Instead of the compliant agreement to their senior living plans that they expected, it became the morning when I revealed exactly how spectacular their underestimation of my capabilities would prove to be. The crisis had been building for 3 weeks, ever since Michael and Jennifer had made what they called their final offer regarding my future. They had scheduled a meeting for February 15th, which they described as the deadline for making a responsible decision about your transition to appropriate senior housing. Eleanor, Jennifer had said during her phone call to arrange the meeting, "We found the perfect solution for your situation, and we need to move quickly to secure your spot at Potomac Senior Living. They have a beautiful 2-bedroom independent living apartment that just became available, but we need to put down a deposit and sign preliminary agreements by Friday to hold it for you. Jennifer, I haven't agreed to move to Potomac Senior Living, or anywhere else. I know, but Eleanor, we've been discussing this for over a year now, and you haven't presented any realistic alternatives or practical solutions. At some point, you need to make a decision and take action instead of just avoiding the inevitable and putting everyone in an impossible situation." What's inevitable and what impossible situation? The fact that you cannot continue living alone in this enormous house indefinitely. You're 72 years old, you've been widowed for over a year, and maintaining this property is becoming too much for one person to handle safely and responsibly. If you wait much longer, you won't have good options available. Jennifer was presenting my future decline as an absolute certainty rather than one possibility among several, and framing their preferred solution as the only reasonable option rather than one choice among many that I was free to make or reject. Jennifer, I'm managing the property perfectly well, and I'm perfectly capable of making my own decisions about my timeline and my preferences. For now, maybe. But what happens when that changes? What happens when you have a serious fall, or a medical emergency, or just can't handle the physical and mental demands anymore? If you wait until there's a crisis, you won't have time to choose the best available options, and you'll be forced to accept whatever's available under emergency circumstances. And if I move to Potomac Senior Living now, while I'm healthy and capable, what happens to all the work Robert and I spent 38 years building and preserving here? Eleanor, that work was meaningful when you and Robert were doing it together as a team. But now, it's just a burden that's preventing you from enjoying your retirement and creating unnecessary stress and risk in your life. Jennifer was dismissing nearly 4 decades of historic preservation, architectural restoration, and community contribution as a burden, rather than recognizing it as ongoing work that continued to provide satisfaction, purpose, and value to both myself and the broader community. When Jennifer and Michael arrived that Thursday morning, they brought printed contracts, financial documentation, moving timelines, and what appeared to be a comprehensive action plan for liquidating my current life and relocating me to institutional care within the next 60 days. "Mom," Michael said as he spread documents across my dining room table with the efficiency of a real estate closing, "we've worked out all the details, coordinated all the timing, and everything looks perfect. You can move into Potomac Senior. Living on March 15th, we can list this property for sale immediately after you're settled, and the whole transition can be completed before the spring market gets too competitive. I haven't agreed to any transition, and I certainly haven't agreed to selling my property. But Mom, we've been talking about this for over a year. At some point, talking needs to turn into decisive action. We've found you a perfect living situation, arranged all the logistics, worked out the financial details, and coordinated the timeline. All you need to do is sign the papers and let us handle the implementation." Michael was treating my year of resistance to their plans as a prolonged decision-making process that had naturally led to accepting their recommendations, rather than as repeated, clear rejections of their entire approach and fundamental assumptions. Jennifer reinforced Michael's framing with her own interpretation of our previous conversations and my apparent decision-making progress. "Eleanor, I know change is scary and overwhelming, especially at your age and after such a major loss. But you've had plenty of time to research your options, consider the alternatives, and think about what's best for your future security and well-being. Potomac Senior Living really is the perfect solution. It provides safety, social opportunities, professional medical support, and complete freedom from property management responsibilities." "Jennifer, I don't want freedom from property management responsibilities. I want to continue managing my own property, making my own decisions, and living my own life." "But why? What are you hoping to accomplish by staying here? You're not developing new projects anymore. You're not hosting the social events you used to organize, and you're not maintaining the property at the same level you and Robert achieved together. You're just maintaining things that used to be meaningful when Robert was alive to share them with you." Jennifer was arguing that my work had lost meaning when Robert died, rather than recognizing that I was perfectly capable of continuing and expanding our preservation work independently, and that I might have my own vision for what I wanted to accomplish going forward. "Jennifer, I'm continuing all of our preservation work, and I'm also developing several new projects and opportunities." "Like what, specifically?" This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when their assumptions about my declining capabilities and lack of vision would collide with the reality of what I had actually been building while they were planning my displacement and calculating their inheritance, like the Hartwell Historic Estate and Luxury Events Center that I'm launching this spring. The silence in my dining room was profound and complete. Jennifer and Michael stared at me as if I had announced that I was planning to run for president or launch myself into space. "What?" Michael finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've spent the last 14 months developing our property into a luxury wedding and events venue that combines historic preservation with high-end hospitality services. We're launching with capacity for weddings up to 150 guests, corporate, retreats, anniversary celebrations, and historic preservation educational programs." Jennifer looked like she was having trouble processing what I was saying, as if the words were in a foreign language. "Eleanor, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the business I've been building while you've been researching senior living facilities. The Hartwell Historic Estate is a fully licensed, professionally designed, and expertly marketed luxury events operation that's already booked solid through the end of this year." Michael grabbed my arm with more force than was appropriate. "Mom, are you being serious? You've been planning an events business?" "I've been building an events business. The venue spaces are completed. The catering facilities are operational. The Historic Preservation Educational Center is ready for tours. And our first wedding is in 6 weeks. I walked to my desk and pulled out the thick leather portfolio that I had been keeping ready for exactly this moment. The comprehensive documentation that would destroy every assumption they had made about my capabilities, my planning, and my future. "What's that?" Jennifer asked, though her voice suggested she already suspected the answer would demolish everything they had been planning for my property and their future. "This is the business plan, financial projections, marketing materials, licensing documentation, and operational procedures for Hartwell Historic Estate and Luxury Events Center. Would you like to see what I've been working on while you've been planning my retirement?" I opened the portfolio and methodically spread the contents across the table, pushing aside their senior living brochures and transition timelines to make room for architectural drawings, financial spreadsheets, professional marketing materials, and stunning photographs of the completed facilities. The first page showed a breathtaking aerial photograph of our property that revealed elegant outdoor ceremony spaces nestled among the historic gardens, a restored carriage house that had been transformed into a bridal suite and preparation area, and the main house configured with reception spaces that could accommodate everything from intimate dinner parties to large wedding celebrations. The formal dining room had been expanded by opening it into the adjacent sitting room, creating a space that could seat 60 people for elegant dinners. The living room had been reconfigured as a cocktail reception area with period-appropriate furniture arrangements that encouraged conversation while showcasing the home's architectural details. The restored tennis court had been transformed into an outdoor ceremony space with a pergola covered in climbing roses and surrounded by gardens that provided a stunning backdrop for weddings and other celebrations. A stone pathway connected the ceremony area to reception spaces on the main house's wraparound porch and the newly constructed pavilion that offered covered dining for up to 100 guests. "Mom," Michael whispered, staring at the photographs as if they showed something impossible. "When did you do all of this?" "I've been working on it since 8 months after your father died. The planning, permitting, design, and construction have taken 18 months, and we're opening for our inaugural event season in 4 weeks." Jennifer was studying the marketing materials with the expression of someone watching their life savings disappear in a market crash. "Eleanor, this is impossible. You can't have built an events venue without us knowing about it. We've been here for visits. We've been through the house. How could you hide something this extensive?" "I didn't hide it. I simply didn't announce it until I was ready to reveal the full scope of what I had accomplished. While you were researching ways to convince me that I was too old to manage my own property, I was working with architects, contractors, event planning specialists, and marketing professionals to create exactly the kind of business that you said was too complex for someone my age to handle." I pulled out the financial projections and placed them directly in front of Jennifer, watching her face as she processed the numbers. "According to our conservative estimates, Hartwell Historic Estate will generate $1.8 million in gross revenue during our first full year of operation, with net profits of approximately $1.2 million after all expenses, staff salaries, and business loan payments." Michael was staring at the numbers as if they were written in hieroglyphics. "Mom, are you saying you're going to make over $1 million a year from this property?" "I'm saying I already am making over $1 million a year from this property. We've been taking bookings for 8 months, and we're booked at 90% capacity through next spring. The waiting list for our signature historic estate wedding packages extends into 2026. Jennifer finally found her voice, though it sounded strained and desperate. "Eleanor, this is completely insane. You can't run an events venue by yourself. The licensing requirements, the insurance complications, the staffing issues, the food service regulations, it's incredibly complex and demanding and risky." "You're absolutely right. That's why I hired Christina Rodriguez as our general manager. She has 12 years of experience managing luxury wedding venues in the Shenandoah Valley. I also hired Marcus Thompson as our executive chef. He trained at the Culinary Institute of America and worked at several high-end catering companies before deciding he wanted to focus on historic venue cuisine." I pulled out staff photographs and organizational charts showing our complete management team. We also have an events coordinator with certification in wedding planning and corporate event management, a historic preservation educator with a master's degree in American architectural history, a facilities coordinator who speaks 3 languages and has experience with international clients, and a maintenance team that includes both our original groundskeeper and 2 additional staff members, with expertise in historic building preservation and landscape maintenance. David was looking through the staff profiles with the expression of someone discovering that his elderly mother had secretly been running NASA. Mom, how did you hire all these people? How did you even know where to find them? Michael, I spent 45 years in real estate working with event planners, caterers, wedding coordinators, and luxury service providers throughout the Washington area. I have relationships with hospitality recruiters, culinary schools, event planning programs, and historic preservation organizations throughout the region. These are exactly the kinds of professionals I've been working with throughout my entire career. Jennifer was studying the financial projections with the desperate intensity of someone looking for any flaw that would prove the entire plan was unrealistic or doomed to failure. Eleanor, these revenue numbers seem incredibly optimistic and unrealistic. How do you know people will actually pay these rates for events in McLean? The competition from established venues must be enormous. I smiled and pulled out our bookings, report and market analysis documentation, because they already have been paying these rates. We're charging $15,000 for our basic wedding package and $35,000 for our signature historic estate experience that includes rehearsal dinner, ceremony, reception, and next day brunch. We're booked solid through the end of next year and have a waiting list of over 120 couples. But who are these people? Who pays that much money for a wedding venue? Government officials who want privacy and elegance for their children's weddings. Foreign diplomats who appreciate historic American architecture. Corporate executives who want unique venues for company celebrations. Wealthy families who value historic preservation and want to support it through their event choices. I pulled out our client demographic analysis and market research. Our target market includes families with household incomes over $200,000 who are interested in historic venues, unique experiences, and supporting preservation causes. It's a rapidly growing market segment in the Washington area, and we're positioned perfectly to serve their needs while advancing historic preservation education. Michael was shaking his head in complete amazement. Mom, I cannot believe you developed all of this without telling us. I cannot believe you spent 18 months trying to convince me to move to assisted living without ever asking what I wanted to do with my life or my property. The truth of that statement hung in the air between us like a physical presence. Jennifer and Michael had been so focused on their assumptions about my limitations that they had never considered the possibility that I might have my own vision, my own plans, and my own expertise to implement them. Jennifer made one final attempt to salvage their vision of my displacement and their property acquisition plans. Eleanor, even if this events venue idea works initially, it's going to be incredibly demanding and stressful to operate. You'll be dealing with demanding clients, managing staff crises, handling vendor coordination, dealing with weather emergencies. It's going to be exhausting and overwhelming. Jennifer, I'm not personally managing day-to-day operations. I'm the owner and creative director, but Christina handles daily management. Marcus runs all culinary operations, and our department heads manage their respective areas. My role is strategic oversight, client relations, and business development. But what happens when clients have emergencies, or staff have problems, or equipment breaks down during events? You'll be ultimately responsible for solving every crisis that occurs. Jennifer, I've been solving real estate crises and managing demanding clients for 45 years. Crisis management and client satisfaction are exactly the skills that made me successful in this industry. Michael tried a different approach. But Mom, what about your health and aging? What happens if you get sick or can't manage the business? Responsibilities as you get older? Michael, I have comprehensive business insurance, disability coverage, a detailed succession plan, and partnership agreements that would allow the business to continue operating if I became unable to fulfill my duties. I've planned for every contingency that you seem to think I'm too old to anticipate. I pulled out our insurance policies and legal documentation. I also have key person insurance that would provide $1.5 million to the business if something happened to me, plus disability insurance that would cover my income if I became unable to work. Everything you've been worried about is already addressed by professional planning and adequate insurance coverage. Jennifer's last desperate attempt focused on the emotional manipulation that had been central to their strategy. Eleanor, don't. You think Robert would want you to be safe and secure rather than taking these kinds of risks and working this hard at your age? Jennifer, Robert would be incredibly proud that I'm using everything we built together to create something even more meaningful and impactful. This venue honors his memory while providing education and inspiration to hundreds of people who are interested in historic preservation. I pulled out the final piece of documentation, the dedication plaque that would be installed at the venue's entrance. The Hartwell Historic Estate and Luxury Events Center is dedicated to the memory of Robert Hartwell, whose vision of historic preservation and architectural restoration continues to inspire guests from around the world. Michael was reading the dedication with tears in his eyes. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry we didn't understand what you were planning. I'm sorry we underestimated you so completely. Michael, you didn't just underestimate me. You tried to convince me that I was too old and incompetent to manage my own life, while simultaneously planning to inherit and profit from my property for your own benefit. The accusation was direct and undeniable. Jennifer and Michael had been operating from mixed motives, superficial concern combined with substantial self-interest, and assumptions about aging that had no basis in my actual capabilities or preferences. We thought we were helping, Jennifer said quietly. You thought you were managing. There's a huge difference between helping someone achieve their goals and trying to convince them to abandon their goals in favor of your preferences and financial plans. But what came next was the most satisfying revelation of all. Actually, there's one more thing you should know about the venue business, I said, pulling out the final documents from my portfolio. What's that? Michael asked, though he looked like he was afraid to hear the answer. The head of our catering team is Maria Santos, who happens to be the sister of your former colleague at Commonwealth Financial, the one who told you that elderly people shouldn't be taking financial risks or starting businesses at their age. The irony was perfect. Jennifer and Michael had been trying to convince me to abandon the work that had inspired Maria Santos to leave her corporate job and pursue a career in historic venue catering that would ultimately contribute to my business success. Maria is our head chef? Michael asked in amazement. Maria is our executive catering coordinator, and she's thrilled to be working at a venue that combines her culinary training with her passion for historic preservation and event design. She says it's exactly the kind of meaningful work she always hoped to find, and she's specifically excited to be working for a business owner who proves that experience and wisdom increase with age rather than decrease. Jennifer looked like she was finally beginning to understand the full scope of what I had accomplished while they were planning my displacement. Eleanor, you've built exactly the kind of business that we thought this property could support. Jennifer, you've spent 18 months telling me I was too old to build exactly the kind of business I was actually building. But then came the revelation that would make their manipulation attempts seem even more absurd and costly. There's something else you need to understand about the timeline here, I continued, pulling out one final set of documents. Remember how you said I needed to make a decision by Friday about Potomac Senior Living? Yes, Jennifer said cautiously. Well, I already made a decision. Last Friday, I accepted a cash offer for this property from Harrison Development Group for $2. $8 million. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. You did what? Michael finally whispered. I sold the house. The closing is scheduled for next Wednesday, which is why I wanted to have this conversation today. You have until Sunday to remove your belongings from the guest cottage and find alternative housing arrangements. Jennifer looked like she was going to faint. Eleanor, you can't have sold the house. We've been planning. We had arrangements. You had assumptions. I had plans. Harrison Development Group made an all-cash offer that was $300,000 above my asking price because they want to preserve the property exactly as it is and use it as their corporate headquarters and client entertainment facility. But where are you going to live? Michael asked, his voice cracking. I'm moving to the luxury penthouse apartment I purchased last month in the new Ritz-Carlton Residences in Georgetown. It's 2,400 square feet with panoramic views of the Potomac River, full concierge services, and it's walking distance from the Kennedy Center and all the cultural activities I've been wanting to pursue. I pulled out the purchase agreement and interior design plans for my new residence. The apartment cost $1.8 million, which I paid in cash from my business profits. I'll be living mortgage-free in a luxury building with 24-hour security, housekeeping, services, and a social environment that includes diplomats, professors, and arts professionals. Jennifer was staring at the apartment specifications as if they were evidence of an alien civilization. But what about the events business? How can you run a venue if you don't live on the property? The events business was always intended to be a transitional project. I built it to prove that I could create something successful and profitable. And then I sold both the business and the property to Harrison Development Group as a complete package. You sold the business too? I sold the business for an additional $1, $2 million. Harrison wants to use the venue for their own corporate events while also continuing the public wedding and event services. Christina Rodriguez will continue as general manager, so all our bookings and commitments will be honored. Michael was struggling to process the financial implications. Mom, how much money did you make from all of this? From the property sale, business sale, and operational profits over the last 18 months? Approximately $2.4 million in net proceeds. Combined with my existing assets, my total net worth is now approximately $6.8 million. And you did all of this while we were trying to convince you to move to senior living? I did all of this because you were trying to convince me to move to senior living. Your assumption that I was too old and incapable to manage my own affairs motivated me to prove exactly how wrong you were. Jennifer finally found her voice, though it sounded hollow and defeated. Eleanor, we had no idea you were capable of something like this. That's exactly the problem, Jennifer. You had no idea what I was capable of because you never asked. You never considered that I might have my own vision for my future. You just assumed that being 72 and widowed automatically made me incompetent and dependent. But the most satisfying moment was yet to come. There's one more thing you should know, I said, pulling out a final folder. Remember how you said you wanted to buy this property yourselves and move to McLean? Yes, Michael said cautiously. Well, I thought about that suggestion very carefully. In fact, I thought it was such an interesting idea that I decided to help you implement it. What do you mean? I mean I used some of my proceeds from the property sale to purchase the perfect house for you. It's a lovely 200 square foot ranch house in Woodbridge, Virginia. The mortgage is $285,000, which should be very manageable on your combined salaries. I handed them the deed and mortgage documents. You bought us a house? Jennifer asked, her voice barely audible. I bought you a house and arranged the financing. The monthly payments are $2,400, which is exactly what you were paying for rent in Richmond. You can move in immediately since you'll need to be out of the guest cottage by Sunday. Michael was staring at the address as if it were a prison sentence. Mom, Woodbridge is an hour from D.C. in traffic. It's a middle-class suburb with tract housing. I know. I thought it would be perfect for a young couple who are interested in building equity and learning what it actually means to own and maintain property. Think of it as a learning experience. Jennifer was reading the mortgage terms with growing horror. Eleanor, this is a 30-year mortgage. We'll be paying on this house until we're in our 60s. Jennifer, you're 31 years old. Paying a mortgage until you're 61 is perfectly normal for most homeowners. I thought you'd appreciate the opportunity to build wealth through real estate appreciation, since you've been so concerned about maximizing property values. The conversation continued for another hour, with Jennifer and Michael gradually accepting that their assumptions about my limitations had been completely wrong, that their plans for my future had been based on fundamental misunderstandings about my capabilities, and that their attempts to manage my life had backfired spectacularly. But the most important outcome was Michael's recognition of how his values had shifted over the years, and his decision to reconsider what really mattered to him. Mom, I've been so focused on financial security and property acquisition that I lost sight of what actually creates a meaningful life. You and Dad built something significant here, and instead of supporting your vision for continuing that work, I tried to convince you to abandon it so we could profit from it. Michael, it's never too late to realign your priorities with your values. Maria Santos made that choice when she left corporate finance to work in hospitality because it felt more meaningful to her. 6 months later, Michael quit his job at Commonwealth Financial and enrolled in a historic preservation master's program at the University of Virginia. He's now working as a preservation consultant and says it's the most fulfilling work he's ever done. Jennifer took longer to accept that her assumptions about aging and capability had been wrong, but she eventually became one of the most vocal advocates in her marketing firm for campaigns that challenge stereotypes about older adults and their capabilities. But perhaps the most satisfying outcome was receiving a call from Harrison Development Group 6 months after the sale. "Ms. Hartwell," said Richard Harrison, the company's CEO, "I wanted to let you know that the Hartwell Historic Estate has become our most successful corporate entertainment facility. We're booking events 18 months in advance, and several clients have asked us to help them find similar properties for their own corporate use. I'm delighted to hear that the venue is continuing to thrive. Actually, I'm calling because we're interested in consulting with you about developing other historic properties for similar uses. Would you be interested in working with us as a historic venue development consultant? Mr. Harrison, I'd be very interested in discussing that opportunity." 3 months later, I launched Hartwell Historic Venue Consulting, specializing in helping property owners transform historic estates into luxury event venues. My first client was a federal judge who owned a 1890s mansion in Alexandria and wanted to create a wedding venue that would also serve as an educational site about Virginia's legal history. The consulting business has been so successful that I've had to hire 2 associates to help manage all the projects. We're currently working on 7 different historic venue developments throughout Virginia and Maryland, and we have a waiting list of property owners who want our services. But the most meaningful recognition came from a letter I received from a client whose daughter had gotten married at the Hartwell Historic Estate before I sold it. "Dear Mrs. Hartwell," she wrote, "I'm 68 years old, and my family has been pressuring me to sell my family's historic farm and move to a retirement community. After seeing what you accomplished with your property and learning about your story, I've decided to start my own agritourism business instead. Thank you for showing me that my age makes me experienced, not expired." That letter now hangs in my Georgetown apartment, next to photographs of Robert and our original property before we began its transformation. Every morning, I wake up in my beautiful apartment with views of the Potomac River and walk to my office, in the Kennedy Center Arts District, where I meet with clients who are passionate about historic preservation and creating meaningful businesses. I'm 73 years old now, and I've never been busier, more challenged, or more fulfilled. The property that Jennifer and Michael wanted me to abandon so I could move to assisted living generated enough wealth to fund my luxury retirement, while also creating a successful consulting business that serves property owners throughout the region. The work that they dismissed as a burden that was preventing me from enjoying retirement became the foundation for meaningful employment, historic preservation education, and the demonstration that aging can mean expansion rather than contraction. Most importantly, I've learned that the best response to people who underestimate your capabilities because of your age is to exceed their expectations so spectacularly that their assumptions become obviously ridiculous. Jennifer was right about one thing: managing this transition was demanding and complex. She was wrong about whether that was a problem or an opportunity. When people ask me for advice about dealing with family members who think they know what's best for your life, I tell them this: don't waste time arguing with people who have already decided you're too old, too set in your ways, or too limited to pursue your dreams. Instead, pursue your dreams so successfully that their assumptions become obviously absurd. The senior living brochures that Jennifer spread across my table that Thursday morning are now in a frame in my office, labeled "The Day I Decided to Prove Them Wrong." And the business plan that Michael and Jennifer thought was impossible is now the foundation for a consulting practice that generates more annual income than Michael's corporate salary and Jennifer's marketing commissions combined. Sometimes the best revenge is living so well that other people's limitations on your potential become a source of motivation rather than discouragement. What would you have done in my situation? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story of turning family assumptions into entrepreneurial triumph resonated with you, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more incredible stories of people who refuse to let others define their limitations. Because remember, it's never too late to prove everyone wrong about what you're capable of achieving. And it's never too early to start planning your next spectacular success. Age is just the number of years you've had to accumulate the experience and wisdom that make your next adventure not only possible, but inevitable. The phone call that truly changed everything came on a warm September evening, exactly 18 months after I had revealed my events business and sold the McLean property. I was in my Georgetown penthouse reviewing proposals for 3 new historic venue consulting projects when my phone rang with a number I didn't immediately recognize. "Mrs. Hartwell, this is Amanda Chen from the Washington Post. I'm writing a feature story about successful entrepreneurs over 70, and your name has come up repeatedly in my research. Would you be willing to speak with me about your journey from widowhood to business success?" Her request surprised me. I had been focused on building my consulting practice and helping other property owners, not on publicity or recognition. "What specifically would you like to discuss? We're particularly interested in how you transformed a family crisis into a business opportunity and how your story challenges assumptions about aging and entrepreneurship. Several of your clients mentioned that you started your venue business specifically to prove that age doesn't limit capability. Who referred you to me? Actually, it was your son, Michael. He's now working as a historic preservation consultant, and he contacted us because he wanted people to know about what you accomplished and how wrong his assumptions about aging had been." The irony wasn't lost on me. The son who had spent months trying to convince me that I was too old to manage my own affairs was now promoting my story as an example of what older adults could achieve when their capabilities weren't underestimated. "I'd be happy to speak with you about the business aspects of what I've built, but I think the more important story is about how families can support older relatives' goals instead of trying to manage their limitations." 3 weeks later, the Washington Post published a full-page feature story titled "The 73-Year-Old Who Built a $1 Million Business While Her Family Planned Her Retirement." The article included photographs of my Georgetown penthouse, my consulting office, and several of the historic venues I had helped develop. But what made the article truly impactful was Michael's candid interview about how his assumptions about aging had been completely wrong. "I spent over a year trying to convince my mother that she was too old to manage her own property," Michael told the reporter. Meanwhile, she was building a business that generated more revenue in its first year than I had earned in my entire career. I learned that my assumptions about aging said more about my limitations than hers. The article also featured interviews with 3 of my consulting clients, all women over 65 who had used their property and expertise to create successful businesses instead of downsizing their lives. Margaret Foster, 69, had transformed her 1880s farmhouse in Loudoun County into a luxury bed and breakfast that was booked solid year-round. Eleanor showed me that my age made me experienced enough to handle complex business operations, not too old to learn new skills, she said. Dr. Patricia Williams, 71, had converted her historic Georgetown townhouse into a boutique wellness center that combined medical services with spa treatments. Working with Eleanor taught me that retirement doesn't have to mean stopping work. It can mean finally doing the work you've always dreamed about. Susan Chen, 67, had turned her family's 1920s estate in Alexandria into a cultural center that hosted art exhibitions, music performances, and educational programs about Asian American history. Eleanor proved that our accumulated experience and wisdom become more valuable with age, not less. The article generated an overwhelming response. Within a week, I received over 200 emails from people throughout the country who were dealing with similar family pressures about aging, property management, and appropriate living situations. Many of the emails came from older adults whose families were pressuring them to downsize, move to senior communities, or give up activities that the families considered too demanding or too risky for their age. But equally powerful were the emails from adult children who recognized their own behavior in the story and wanted to change their approach to supporting their aging parents. One particularly moving email came from David Rodriguez in Phoenix. Mrs. Hartwell, I read your story and realized I've been making the same mistakes with my 75-year-old father that your son made with you. My dad wants to start a woodworking business, and I've been telling him it's too late to learn new skills and too risky to invest money at his age. After reading about your success, I'm going to help him pursue his dream instead of trying to talk him out of it. The response to the article led to something I hadn't anticipated: invitations to speak at conferences, universities, and professional organizations about entrepreneurship, aging, and family dynamics. My first speaking engagement was at Georgetown, University's business school, where I addressed MBA students about late career entrepreneurship and the advantages of experience. When you're 25 and starting a business, you're gambling with potential, I told the audience of future business leaders. When you're 75 and starting a business, you're investing accumulated wisdom, established relationships, and proven judgment. Age doesn't limit entrepreneurship, it enhances it. The students' questions revealed how much their assumptions about aging had been shaped by stereotypes rather than evidence. Mrs. Hartwell, asked one student, don't older entrepreneurs face more risks because they have less time to recover from failures? That assumes that older entrepreneurs are more likely to fail, which isn't supported by data. Older entrepreneurs actually have higher success rates because they have better judgment, more resources, and deeper industry knowledge. The biggest risk is assuming that age automatically means limitation. But the most significant impact of the publicity came when I received a call from Dr. Sarah Chen, director of the National Institute on Aging. Mrs. Hartwell, we've been following your story and your consulting work. We're launching a research initiative on productive aging and entrepreneurship, and we'd like you to serve on our advisory board. What would that involve? We're studying how family attitudes affect older adults' willingness to pursue new challenges and start businesses. Your experience with family resistance and ultimate success provides exactly the kind of real-world data we need to understand these dynamics. The research project led to my involvement in a national study of over 1,000 entrepreneurs who started businesses after age 65. The findings were remarkable and challenged many common assumptions about aging and capability. Older entrepreneurs had a 70% success rate compared to 28% for entrepreneurs under 30. They were more likely to create sustainable businesses, less likely to make impulsive decisions, and more successful at managing cash flow and building client relationships. Most importantly, the study found that family support was the strongest predictor of success for older entrepreneurs, while family discouragement was the strongest predictor of abandoning entrepreneurial plans. family members who encourage older relatives to pursue new challenges and business opportunities create environments where aging becomes associated with growth rather than decline, the study concluded. Families who focus on managing older relatives' limitations rather than supporting their goals often create self-fulfilling prophecies of dependence and decline. The research findings led to my next major project, developing a consulting practice specifically for families dealing with conflicts about aging, independence, and capability. I began working with families where adult children were pressuring elderly parents to downsize, relocate, or abandon projects and activities that the children considered inappropriate for their age. One of my most successful interventions involved the Morrison family in Richmond. Janet Morrison, 74, wanted to start an organic farming operation on her 40-acre property, but her 3 adult children were convinced she was too old for the physical demands and financial risks of farming. Mrs. Morrison has a master's degree in agricultural science, 30 years of experience with large-scale gardening, and $400,000 in retirement savings she wants to invest, I told her children during our family meeting. She's not too old to farm. She's experienced enough to farm. Successfully? Working with the family, we developed a business plan that addressed their concerns about physical demands and financial risks, while supporting Janet's vision for creating a sustainable farm that would provide fresh produce to local restaurants and farmers markets. 18 months later, Morrison Organic Farm was generating $180,000 annually in revenue and had a waiting list of restaurants wanting to purchase their produce. Janet's children had become her business partners, handling marketing and distribution while Janet managed cultivation and quality control. I thought I was protecting my mother from making a mistake, her son told me. Instead, I was trying to prevent her from achieving something remarkable. Over the following 3 years, I worked with over 50 families dealing with similar conflicts. In every case, the issue wasn't the older adult's capability. It was the family's assumptions about what aging meant and what older adults could achieve. But perhaps the most personally meaningful recognition came when I received an invitation to speak at the International Conference on Aging and Entrepreneurship in Geneva, Switzerland. The conference brought together researchers, policymakers, business leaders, and older entrepreneurs from around the world to discuss how societies could better support productive aging and late-career business development. During my keynote speech, I looked out at an audience of experts who were dedicated to changing global attitudes about aging and capability. The most dangerous assumption about aging, I said, isn't that our bodies change as we get older. The most dangerous assumption is that physical changes automatically mean cognitive decline, that experience automatically means inflexibility, and that age automatically means we need other people to make decisions about our lives and our potential. I continued. When my family tried to convince me that I was too old to manage my own property, they weren't just wrong about my capabilities. They were wrong about what aging means. They assumed that my 72 years represented decline from some earlier peak rather than 72 years of accumulated experience, knowledge, and wisdom that made me more qualified to tackle complex projects, not less. The standing ovation lasted for 12 minutes. But the most rewarding outcome of the conference was the network of researchers, entrepreneurs, and advocates who began collaborating on projects that challenge stereotypes about aging and support older adults who want to pursue new ventures. We launched the Global Initiative for Productive Aging, which provides resources, funding, and mentorship for entrepreneurs over 60 who are starting new businesses or expanding existing ones. The initiative has supported the launch of over 200 businesses founded by people over 65, ranging from technology, consulting firms, and artisan cooperatives to organic farms and educational programs. 1 year after the Geneva conference, I received the most prestigious recognition of my career, the United Nations Award for Innovation in Aging and Entrepreneurship. The ceremony was held at my original venue, the Hartwell Historic Estate, which Harrison Development Group had graciously offered for the event. Delegates from around the world attended to learn about our model for supporting productive aging and late career entrepreneurship. During my acceptance speech, I shared the stage with 3 of my consulting clients who had transformed their family conflicts into business successes. Janet Morrison, who had expanded her organic farm into an agricultural education center, Dr. Patricia Williams, whose wellness center had become a model for integrative healthcare, and Margaret Foster, whose bed and breakfast had become a destination for sustainable tourism. These remarkable individuals prove every day that aging doesn't mean accepting other people's limitations on your potential, I said. They prove that experience, wisdom, and accumulated knowledge are assets that become more valuable with age, not less. As I concluded my speech, I looked out at an audience that included family members who had learned to support rather than manage their older relatives' goals, adult children who had discovered that their parents' dreams deserved encouragement rather than discouragement, and older adults who had realized that their age made them experienced rather than expired. The question isn't whether people over 65 are capable of learning new skills, managing complex projects, and contributing meaningfully to their communities, I said. The question is whether the rest of us are wise enough to support their efforts instead of limiting their possibilities. The final standing ovation lasted for 20 minutes. That evening, as delegates from around the world toured the venues and programs that had grown from my original consulting practice, I walked through the gardens of my former property, where Robert and I had spent so many quiet evenings planning our preservation projects and dreaming about the legacy we wanted to leave. The gardens were still beautiful, still maintained according to the historic landscape plan we had developed. But now they were also hosting an international conference that was changing how the world thinks about aging, capability, and the potential that comes with accumulated wisdom. The event center was filled with the sounds of conversation in a dozen languages as delegates shared their experiences and planned future projects they would implement in their own countries. The historic house was hosting workshops on supporting family entrepreneurship across generations and challenging ageism in business development. I stood in the place where Jennifer had spread those senior living brochures across my dining room table, trying to convince me that I was too old to manage my own life. Now that same room was hosting a workshop for adult children learning how to support their parents' business dreams instead of limiting them. The transformation was complete, but it had exceeded anything I could have imagined when I first decided to prove Jennifer and Michael wrong about my capabilities. We had wanted to challenge assumptions about aging and demonstrate that older adults could achieve remarkable things when their capabilities were supported rather than managed. Instead, we had created a global movement that was changing how families, communities, and governments think about productive aging. We had wanted to prove that experience and wisdom increase with age rather than decrease. Instead, we had created research, programs, and policies that support older entrepreneurs around the world. Most importantly, we had wanted to show that aging doesn't have to mean accepting limitations imposed by other people's assumptions about what older adults are capable of achieving. Instead, we had created a living example that aging can mean using accumulated experience, wisdom, and resources to accomplish things that seemed impossible to people who confused chronological age with capability. As I stood in the gardens that night, surrounded by the sounds of people from around the world learning and growing and planning their own contributions to productive aging, I realized that Jennifer had been right about one thing during that confrontation 3 years earlier. She had said that managing my property and my life would be demanding and complex. She had been absolutely correct. What she had been completely wrong about was whether demanding and complex work was a problem to be avoided or an opportunity to be embraced. The Hartwell Historic Estate Consulting practice proves every day that the most fulfilling life isn't the easiest life. It's the life that uses all of your accumulated experience, knowledge, and wisdom in service of something meaningful. And sometimes the most satisfying victory isn't proving that you were right. It's creating something so successful that other people's assumptions about your limitations become the foundation for helping others overcome similar limitations. The senior living brochures that Jennifer spread across my table that day are now part of our educational display about ageism and family dynamics at the International Center for Productive Aging that we established at Georgetown University. And the business that Michael and Jennifer thought was impossible for someone my age is now teaching. People around the world that age is just the number of years you've had to accumulate the experience that makes your next adventure not only possible, but inevitable. 6 months ago, I received a letter that summarized everything we had accomplished. Dear Mrs. Hartwell, wrote Dr. Elizabeth Santos, a 68-year-old physician in California. My family was pressuring me to retire and sell my practice because they thought I was too old to handle the demands of modern medicine. After reading about your story and attending one of your workshops, I decided to expand my practice instead. I just opened a new wellness center that combines traditional medicine with integrative approaches, and I've never been happier or more successful. Thank you for showing me that my age makes me more qualified, not less. That letter hangs in my office next to photographs from the UN ceremony, research publications about productive aging, and business plans from the dozens of entrepreneurs over 65 who have built successful ventures with our support. But the most treasured item in my office is a handwritten note from Michael that arrived on my 75th birthday. Mom, I spent so much time trying to protect you from making mistakes that I almost prevented you from achieving something extraordinary. Thank you for teaching me that the biggest mistake would have been limiting your potential based on my assumptions about aging. I'm proud to be your son, and I'm inspired every day by what you've built and what you continue to accomplish. Happy birthday to the most successful entrepreneur I know. Today, at 75, I wake up each morning in my Georgetown penthouse, review consulting projects for historic venue developments in 6 different states, and meet with researchers who are studying how to support productive aging worldwide. I'm busier, more challenged, and more fulfilled than I've ever been. The property that Jennifer and Michael wanted me to abandon so I could move to assisted living became the foundation for a global initiative that supports older entrepreneurs and challenges ageism in families and communities. The work that they dismissed as a burden became the basis for meaningful employment, international recognition, and the demonstration that aging can mean expansion rather than limitation. Most importantly, I've learned that the best response to people who underestimate your capabilities because of your age is to exceed their expectations, so spectacularly that you inspire others to do the same. When people ask me for advice about dealing with family members who think they know what's best for your life, I tell them this. Don't waste time arguing with people who have already decided you're too old or too limited to pursue your dreams. Instead, pursue your dreams so successfully that you become an example for others facing similar limitations. That basement that they wanted me to sleep in while they took over my house became the inspiration for building something so remarkable that sleeping in penthouses became the least impressive part of the story. And the assumptions they made about my declining capabilities became the motivation for proving that the only thing that declines with age is other people's expectations, unless you refuse to accept those limitations and show them what's actually possible. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever had to prove people wrong about your capabilities? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story of turning family assumptions into global impact resonated with you, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more incredible stories of people who refuse to let others define their limitations. Because remember, it's never too late to prove everyone wrong about what you're capable of achieving, and it's never too early to start planning your next spectacular success. The only real limitation is accepting other people's assumptions about what's possible at your age. Age isn't a number that defines your limitations. It's a measurement of how much experience, wisdom, and capability you've accumulated to make your next adventure even more remarkable than anything you've accomplished before. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.